Hello, my name is Bonnie Newman, and today I'm going to do a review of the Elwha River Restoration Plan. So, for some background, the Elwha River is located in Port Angeles, Washington, which you can see on the map there. It's a freshwater habitat restoration, but it does flow into the Pacific Ocean, so that's important to consider for a lot of the species that live there. And there were two dams installed in the 1930s, the Elwha River Dam and the Glines Canyon Dam. And these dams are what led to a drastic decrease in fish populations, biodiversity loss, as well as a lot of sediment buildup in the river. So the removal of the dams and subsequent restoration work began in 2012 after decades of controversy because the dams were used to produce clean electricity, so a lot of people saw them as causing more good than harm, I guess. And this project was a collaboration between a whole bunch of organizations. So some of the major ones were the U.S. Geological Survey, the Olympic National Park, Lower Elwha Klalam Tribe, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I want to talk a little more about the Lower Elwha Klalam tribe specifically because they led a lot of the struggle to get the dams removed, and they were and still are heavily involved in the river restoration. They've lived near the Elwha for thousands of years, so they're a pretty good authority on the ecology of the area, and their website's where I got a lot of my information from. They have a lot of cultural sites along the Elwha and surrounding areas, and they've traditionally relied on the river for food and water. So the main goal of this project was salmon population restoration. The Elwha River has traditionally been home to a bunch of different species of salmon. They serve as prey for local predators, predators for smaller fish and invertebrates, and food sources for many of the people who live near the river. So they're very much a keystone species for this ecosystem. And then here's a list of all the salmon species that can be found in the Elwha. The installation of the dams caused the salmon population to decrease drastically because it blocks the passage of the salmon from the Elwha to their spawning ground in the Pacific Ocean. This caused the Elwha salmon populations to decrease by 90% during the 100 years that the dam stood. The removal of these salmon heavily impacted overall biodiversity of the river, and additionally, the dams changed the structure and morphology of the river due to sediment buildup and changes in flow. So the first step of restoration was to remove the dams, and this began in 2012 and ended in 2014. After the dams were gone, 10.5 million metric tons of sediment that had been built up behind the dams had to be redistributed, and the USGS was in charge of continually monitoring water quality and sediment samples while this was going on. This project had a budget of $350 million, which makes it the second largest restoration project in National Park Service history, and about $60 million of that was used for the dam removal. So after sediment redistribution, focus was put on revegetation. So the Lower Elwha Klalam tribe took the lead in replanting native species in areas impacted by the dams, and they also conduct research on invasive species, replanting methods, seed dispersal, and other relevant topics. And they also conduct engineered log jams, which are structures that they put in the water to mimic naturally occurring log jams that don't really happen as much anymore because there's not as much old growth forest. And this creates habitat for salmon and other species. So, some of the results of the project were that salmon populations have increased dramatically. However, it's estimated that it will take a few more decades to reach pre dam population levels. There's been an overall biodiversity increase in the river, the surrounding wilderness, and the nearby ocean. There's been an increase in tourism revenue in the area. There have been changes to the structure and the flow of the river. And something surprising was that draining the reservoirs uncovered cultural sites of the Lower Elwha Klalam tribe that had previously been underwater. So the Elwha River Restoration Plan was considered an overall success. The project is now in an observational phase, so there's continual monitoring of salmon populations, water quality, and sediment samples, stuff like that. There are ongoing concerns that the restored area will be developed now that it is considered more desirable land. So more legislation may be needed to protect the Elwha from future harm, but groups like the Lower Elwha Klallam tribe and other organizations continue to advocate for the health of the river. And here's some of the sources I used. Thank you for listening.